Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6:01 p.m. Haisepka, Konas, Alapskaki Patanakwil, Tasi Atal Atash, Snanimok, Mistimok, Nihak Wushasta, Tamak Atanakwil. Thank you, everyone, for gathering here today. We give our highest gratitude to the people of Snanimok, on whose territory we are holding this meeting this evening, acknowledging that we have people also attending the meeting from Stanawas and Staminas First Nations, and that we serve our Métis relatives, our Inuit relatives, and many Indigenous peoples who live within the urban area of the district as well. So our second order of business this evening, it's my great pleasure to say that we are going to do an oath of office. And so with that, I will pass things over to Mark, our Secretary Treasurer.
Good evening and thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Charlene. So this evening, it's my pleasure to start off with the oath of office for our newest trustee, recently elected in the by-election that finished a couple of weeks ago. So pursuant to Section 50, Sub 1 of the School Act, a person elected or appointed to office must make a prescribed oath of office within 45 days after the declaration of the election or of appointment. At this time, Naomi Bailey will swear the oath of office and sign the trustee code of conduct. And with respect to the declaration of election is on our website. And again, congratulations to trustee-elect Bailey, soon to be trustee Bailey. So I'll turn it over to her to swear or affirm the oath of office.
Thank you, Mark. I, Naomi Bailey, do affirm that I am qualified to hold office as a trustee in the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public School District and meet the trustee qualification requirements set out in the School Act. I have not, by myself or any other person, knowingly contravened the School Act respecting vote buying, intimidation, or other election offenses in relation to my election as a trustee. I will abide by the School Act and I will faithfully perform the duties of my office and will not allow any private interest to influence my conduct in public matters. I will comply with the requirements of the School Act that relate to conflict of interest, and in particular, I will comply with the requirements relating to disclosure of pecuniary and indirect pecuniary interest in a matter.
Great, and I think you're going to sign. We will be posting the oath of office on the website. And so, Madam Chair, I would declare that trustee-elect Bailey is now trustee-elect and is appropriate to take the seat around the board table.
Thank you very much.
I have to sign this as well.
Sign the code of conduct as well. And the code of conduct, for those that are watching, is Nanaimo Ladysmith School District Code of Conduct of Trustees that's been instituted and all the trustees sign. And so it's also available on the website to be able to view.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the board, Naomi, Nawilum, welcome. We're very excited for you to be a part of the team.
Thank you. Yay.
Great. All right, so this is very exciting. It's nice to have a team of 9 once again. So I do not have any transfer of items to the open meeting agenda this evening. We have an addition presentation, which will be 11.1. No deletions or change of order have been brought forward for the agenda this evening. And so are there any questions regarding the agenda in addition to what I've mentioned? Seeing none, is there any objection to the approval of the agenda? With no objections, the agenda is approved this evening. Thank you very much. Moving on to section 8 of the agenda, approval of the minutes. That the minutes of the regular board meeting held on December 15th, 2021 be adopted. Is there a mover? Moved by Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee Higginson. Is there any objection to the motion? Noting Jessica will be abstaining from the vote, and Chantel will also be abstaining from the vote. So the motion carries with the 2 abstentions. Thank you. Section 9 of the agenda, section 72.3 report 9.1, but the section 72.3 report from the closed board meeting on December 15th, 2021, and the special closed board meetings on January 5th, 2022 and January 12th, 2022 be received. It's been moved by Stephanie, and is there a second? Seconded by Greg. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Trustee Stanley abstains from the vote. Trustee O'Neill is also abstaining. With no one opposed, the motion carries with the 2 abstentions. Announcements and reminders. Education Committee will be held on February 2nd, 2022. Business Committee meeting will be held on February 9th. Our Board of Education meeting following this one will be held on February 23rd, 2022. Also a reminder that we have a statutory holiday, Family Day, February 21st. We also have non-instructional days for the professional development of our staff on February 7th and 8th. And I'd just like to take a moment this evening to acknowledge that we have a responsibility to come back to this and remind the public and ourselves of our responsibilities related to truth and reconciliation, and sending an acknowledgement to the families whose children have been found and acknowledged in the Williams Lake area at the residential school there, recognizing that there are going to be many more times where we make this acknowledgement of the tragic history of residential schools in Canada. And so today, want to acknowledge that before we move forward with the business of our evening. So we will move into our presentation, 11.1, and I will invite our presenter to join us. Okay, good evening. And so what I'll do is continue to keep myself organized. So presentation maximums are 10 minutes. And so what we do is we set a timer and we'll give you a 1-minute warning so that you're not shocked when I say time's up. And then there will be time for questions from trustees. And so with that, I will pass it over to you, Nancy. Welcome and thank you for joining us this evening.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Nancy Illis. I am a longtime resident of Nanaimo, an involved member of the community, and a mom. I've worked on committees with some of you over the past decade and have seen you do great things for this district. I've seen firsthand how much you care. Collaboration, diversity, inclusion, integrity, mutual respect, transparency, success for all. These are words taken from the district website. Mandate, an authoritative command or instruction. It doesn't feel very cohesive to me. What do you hope to achieve with this mandate? These mandates are breaking supreme federal law. There is ongoing debate as to the validity of these mandates under several sections of our human rights codes. Medical treatments can only be legally undertaken with informed consent. Forced participation is a violation of the Nuremberg Code. Why now? It's a decision that is going backwards, as many countries around the world are currently doing away with COVID restrictions altogether. So far, 26 school districts in BC already have voted no to mandatory vaccination. I have yet to hear of an unvaccinated staff member causing an outbreak. In fact, the data is unambiguously clear that Omicron is much less virulent than previous variants and is creating robust, long-lasting natural immunity. Do you feel this is a decision that should be on you to make? To make a medical decision for the safety of others, you need to understand all the aspects. Are you prepared to be personally liable for any injuries due to a forced vaccine? I meet people every week, who have had an adverse reaction to these injections. Where there is risk, there must be choice. Do you fully understand mRNA technology? Do you realize the definition of both vaccine and fully vaccinated have recently changed? How many boosters will it take to be up to date? Do you know how to separate relative risk reduction from absolute risk reduction and deaths with COVID versus death from COVID in the raw data to get the full understanding of what the numbers mean? In the heated debate over vaccine mandates, science and logic have often been lost amid politics and fear. Vaccinated or unvaccinated, we're all being lied to. At this point, the majority of the population is vaccinated, most 2 or even 3 times. The vaccines were touted to stop COVID, then to prevent transmission, then to prevent hospitalizations and deaths. They have not done what we hoped they would do. The vaccines do not even stop transmission. This is a fact fully acknowledged by the CDC. The vaccines have not saved us. We did not reach herd immunity. The goalposts still keep moving. Given that the premise of the mandates, lockdowns, and restrictions are all predicated on the effectiveness of a treatment that is failing to do what it is supposed to do, one must ask, what good are these mandates? I do not support the mandatory vaccination policy. A mandate takes away choice. I talk to people with chronic medical conditions whose lives have been made harder and lonelier due to mandates. We have seen what the mandates have done in our community to small businesses, healthcare workers, city workers, and ferry workers. People fired, off on extended leave, quitting a career they love, taking early retirement, working under extreme stress due to lack of choice, lack of respect, lack of community. With these latest mandates, both school staff and our children will suffer with the staffing shortages and fear-based decision-making. Nanaimo Ladysmith needs compassion, not more division, not more mandates. In summary, these vaccines do not stop transmission. They don't even slow it down. These vaccines have been proven to be unsafe compared to traditional vaccines. These vaccines are still experimental. We do not yet know the long-term effects. So, by these facts, you must acknowledge your mandate does not protect students and staff from Omicron, as you stated as a reason for implementing it. How will history evaluate these mandates? How will history evaluate us for how we have treated the unvaccinated? Please take the time to think about the questions I've asked tonight and to review the information and current studies I've included. I would respectfully ask that more conversation happen with stakeholders before you go any further with this mandate. Please reconsider your decision. It's not too late. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your presentation, Nancy. Do we have any questions of the presenter this evening? So we don't have any questions for you this evening, so we thank you for your presentation and appreciate that you took some time out of your evening to share your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye now. Okay, so we'll be moving on in our agenda to the correspondence section. So section 12.1, first item of correspondence for consideration this evening, Canadian COVID Care Alliance, call to suspend the authorization of COVID-19. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence from Canadian COVID Care Alliance to be received and filed. Is there a mover? Yeah, so that's been moved by Stephanie and seconded by Greg. Is there any discussion on the motion? So I'll call the question on the motion. Is there anyone opposed? The motion carries unanimously. 12.2, V. Read, safety measures to combat aerosol spread of COVID-19 in schools, that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence from V. Read to the board chair for response. It's been moved by Elaine and seconded by Jessica. Any discussion on the motion? With no discussion, the motion carries unanimously. 12.3, a letter from the Regional District of Nanaimo, initiation of RSG minor amendment 1329, 133 and 1340 Kip Road. Greg?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, if I may, just wanted to advise that I'll be stepping away from both 13, 12.3 and 12.4. So okay. I will be in contact on those items. Thank you.
Thank you. So the recommended motion for the board is that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence from the Regional District of Nanaimo for staff for response. Is there, let's see, Stephanie has moved the motion and Tanya has seconded the motion. Any discussion? With no discussion, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Motion carries unanimously. 12.4, Regional District of Nanaimo proposed Regional Growth Strategy Amendment for 2935 Trans-Canada Highway. The recommendation is that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence from the Regional District of Nanaimo to staff for response. See, that's been moved by Jessica and seconded by Elaine. Any discussion? No discussion, so I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And finally, 12.5, I apologize in advance as I make an attempt to say this appropriately. Your last name, K-I-N DiNardo. My apologies if I've said that incorrectly. regarding elementary school safety. That the Board of Education of School District Number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, refer the above correspondence from K. Ianida Nardo, I'm sorry, to staff for response. Is there a mover? Moved by Jessica, and a second. And by Stephanie. Any discussion on the motion? Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks through the chair. Just a question perhaps to staff. Just looking at the correspondence, it made me wonder what provisions or what are we currently doing at this location?
So if we would like to discuss the correspondence, it would need to get moved to new business for further discussion or for staff to be able to present that information. I'm not sure if they're ready for that this evening or not.
Right. Would that need to be a motion? I see the superintendent say, well, it's popped up on the screen.
Yeah, through you, Chair, we would need a little time to respond to that.
Okay, so then my suggestion is that we follow up with some information to the entire board about the situation once staff has had a chance to investigate and respond. That seems okay. Mark, did you have something that you wanted to add?
I would just note, Chair, that we do have a vandalism report we anticipate to be coming to February, and we likely would be prepared to respond. I know this is not quite on that point, but somewhat similar. We could be prepared to respond during that presentation in the February business meeting if that was timely.
Yes, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Greg, does that help you with the motion?
It does. I suppose it's more procedural now, whether the board wants to table, that's not the right word, maybe it is, set the motion aside for now until we give staff a chance to respond, or they want to just proceed with the letter from the chair.
This one is letter from staff.
Oh, staff, sorry.
Yeah. Are you asking to set aside the motion?
Procedurally, yes, if I can. I'm not sure if what would be required to make that happen.
Yeah, so you've moved that. Is there a second to table the motion? So Naomi has seconded the motion to table. And Mark, do we need a vote on a motion to table?
Madam Chair, I would perhaps recommend that referral rather than tabling would be used in the circumstances. Tabling would just have it not debated this evening and then disappear, whereas a referral to a specific time or a later meeting would be appropriate. And then I will quickly grab my Robert's rules to see, depending on what course the board determines, whether it allows for debate or it's going to be just a vote.
Okay, so here's what I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask the mover and the seconder if you would like to withdraw your motion to move and your motion to second, and then we would move a motion to refer the correspondence to the business committee in February.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so sorry, I wasn't asking you. I'm actually asking Jessica and Stephanie, the original movers of the original motion.
Yes, that is fine with me.
Stephanie? Great. Okay, so the motion has been pulled from the table, and now I will entertain a motion from Trustee Keller to refer the correspondence to the Business Committee of February.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry about the confusion and the challenge here. So I'd like to move a motion that this item be referred to the February Business Committee for further discussion.
Great, thank you. And then I have a second from Stephanie on that. It's a good test of my chairing skills here this evening. Any comments or discussion on this motion to refer the correspondence? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Yeah, did you want to comment on it, Greg?
Maybe I will, just briefly, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
The reason I had brought this up is just because we've heard on and off about similar issues in the district, and I'm just interested in learning more about any actions that we either are doing or potentially could do to help address this.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. So I am going to make a comment and then I will call the question. So my comment is just to advise the board that I will let the letter writer know that their correspondence has been referred to a committee for further discussion prior to their receiving a response, so that the response will take a little bit longer, but that we will be discussing it further. And so I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. So moving on to committee reports, Business Committee, Trustee Keller.
Probably shouldn't have turned my camera off so quickly there. Yes, so thank you, Chair. So we do have one item, 13.1, from the Business Committee motion, and if I may just read that now.
Go ahead.
So it reads as follows, that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, amend the objectives under the board goal to be a leader in environmental stewardship and sustainability by removing reference to establishing an environmental sustainability committee and adding the objective of creating an environmental stewardship action plan.
Okay, and I see that Jessica has seconded your motion. Did you want to motivate the motion?
Sure. So this is really all about a good news story. The board had adopted our strategic plan that had an environmental stewardship committee as a goal. We've achieved that goal. We now have a environmental stewardship committee, or sustainability committee rather, which is great. And the next kind of logical step along the process is to start the work of creating an environmental stewardship action plan for the district. So this is kind of a line of progression and moving the district towards meeting, I think will be an excellent environmental stewardship and sustainability initiative or initiatives. And just looking forward to seeing what comes out of this. So thank you, Chair. That's all I have at this time.
Great, thank you. Jessica is our next speaker.
Thank you. I actually cannot add anything to what Greg so eloquently just said, but I couldn't withdraw my comment to comment. So I'll just say what Greg said sounds great. And I just would encourage everyone to support this. I do think it's just a logical step forward in our progression towards achieving our board goals and our environmental stewardship policy. And that creating this environmental action plan will be, a really great step forward to the district. And so I'm hoping and assuming that everyone's going to support this. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the motion? So with no other comments on the motion, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? And the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Trustee Keller. So moving into Education Committee, Tanya.
Thank you. Item 13.2, that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, engage Policy 2.19 and assign an ad hoc committee to rename Koltai Elementary School.
And is there a second? Naomi has seconded the motion. Go ahead and motivate if you wish, Tanya.
Thank you, I shall. I think that the school has done a lot of good work in explaining their reasonings around this. I believe that our naming policy I have heard a few questions about next steps, and I certainly, Chair, would invite you to do a brief summary of what's going to happen next in terms of policy 2.19 for people listening or who might watch the meeting to hear about this. But overall, I do believe that we will have time still as we do this process to answer any questions and concerns that people have, and those are related to the past work that was done with the totem and not dishonoring the work of the previous principal when the school was first open. Overall, though, this is when a request like this comes from the school itself and the staff and the parents, and they have already done a lot of the initial conversations within that school community. I believe we have a responsibility to honor that and explore it and have those community conversations. I think it's legit.
Thank you. So what I can offer is that the first step in our process is to assign the ad hoc committee and then to undertake a process, which is very well outlaid in our new naming policy that we have. It will consider a significant amount of consultation as we consider what that process looks like and who gets spoken with, so that we can ensure that we are upholding. We need to ensure that we hold up the ancestors while making changes potentially to the name of that school. And so it has to be work that's done in a good way, in a thoughtful way, with a deep amount of consultation. And so all of that will occur. The likely first work of the ad hoc committee will be consider that process and what we will do to undertake it in a thoughtful manner. So do we have any other speakers?
I would simply say that was beautifully stated, Chair, and I knew you would say it better than me.
Thank you very much for that compliment. I appreciate it. So I will call the question on the motion. Is there any objection? Yeah. With no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Board. All right, so we will move into section 14 of our agenda, senior staff reports. I will call on Mark Walsh, our Secretary Treasurer, regarding school site acquisition charge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this evening you'll see on page 20, or sorry, not page 25. Get to the correct page here. On page 32. You'll recall, just a brief background as a reminder, is that the district has been pursuing the concept of a school site acquisition charge for some time. The idea of SSAC is the concept that when developers develop a house or an apartment or something along that lines, that's going to produce additional children that the school district is ultimately going to need to serve, there may be an impact on our ability to do that by lacking facilities, or alternatively lacking facilities in the appropriate areas. So as we fill up west of Pleasant Valley and south of Seaview, as for instance Lansville is growing strongly right now, we don't actually have any infrastructure there that would serve students. And as it gets dense enough to serve them, we're going to need to likely have a school at some point. So in order to do that, we need to be well ahead of the game to start collecting money in order to acquire the land in that particular circumstance. So in Lansville and in Nanaimo and in the regional district of Nanaimo, we've actually already had the respective councils and board pass bylaws that support the school site acquisition charge. And so the way that we've done it is that we've looked at the district as it's a north side of the district and a south side of the district. So we know that you can't separate what's happening, growth in Lansville or Area C of RDN, for instance, in Nanaimo. You can't really separate them in the sense that really we serve kids at Dover, as an example, from all three areas. But when you look at the south side of the district, and so Cowichan Valley Regional District, Ladysmith, they really are a bit more distinct. Yes, there's crossover in the Cedar area, the South Wellington area, but what's happening necessarily in Lansville doesn't impact what's happening in Ladysmith. And so we've looked at the south side as a little bit different. So as we've been consulting with our partners about our enrollment projections, and you'll recall those enrollment projections were done by a geospatial consultant group out of Vancouver that's taken municipal data, municipal and regional data, to determine the future growth enrollment projections of the district. And Nanaimo Ladysmith is one of the fastest growing areas in this province, perhaps in the country. And so we're now at a place where we have consulted and we've got the numbers with respect particularly to Ladysmith and the CVRD, which really only has one site and not a ton of development necessarily, and determined that there is going to be a future need. And what I mean by that is that the number of students that we currently serve is going to increase via development. So if we have 100 today and we have 104 tomorrow, there's 4 additional. That's not the number. It's in there. It's much more than that, of course. Then we look at our capacity, and so we look and we say, okay, how much is Ladysmith Intermediate? How many can that hold? LSS, etc. And we even took Davis Road as into account, even though it is a closed school. Added up all the students that we have, all the capacity that we have, and then how many kids we anticipate to serve. We do not have enough capacity to serve those kids, if indeed they show up in the next decade. And so we're asking the board to pass this resolution that would now extend the school site acquisition charge to CVRD in Ladysmith. We then will write to CVRD and Ladysmith tomorrow saying we anticipate growth and we want to institute this. We'll then go and consult some more. They're aware this is coming with Stanawas, with Staminas as a major landholder and maybe impacting the enrollment in that area, as well as Ladysmith Development Community and CVRD, whoever they suggest that we should consult with. After 60 days, we'll come back to the board or thereabouts and say, board, okay, we're ready for a bylaw. And then right after that, we'd institute the school site acquisition charge. As a reminder, only 35% of any land purchase can be supported by the school site acquisition charge. So the anticipation is that the Ministry of Education and the board really are still doing the heavy lifting with respect to the purchase of land and all of the construction. But development causes capacity need, and that's what this resolution is for. I do note that our neighbors to the south are going through this process, as I understand it, in Cowichan. I believe there's 16 or 17 districts across the province with these in place. We had one in place until the late 90s, early 2000s, when our enrollment started to decline significantly, and so the recommended motion is there for your review.
Great. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, or is there anyone that would like to move the motion? Trustee Higginson, go ahead.
Okay. The Board of Education of School District number 68 in Nanaimo Ladysmith approve the school site resolution for presentation to the town of Ladysmith and Cowichan Valley Regional District for a consultation period of not less than 60 days for final approval by the board by board bylaw following the consultation period.
Thank you. That's been seconded by Jessica. Stephanie, did you want to open debate on the motion?
I think our Secretary Treasurer did a great job. I think this is proactive and necessary for us to be able to respond to future growth. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Seeing no other speakers, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? With no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That takes us to 14.2 with Mark regarding childcare rental rate structure.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. The first rule of administration is make sure your board is in the know before you're having conversations out in the broader world. And so what we wanted to do is just briefly bring to the board's attention that staff has been working through draft rate structure with respect to our childcare bills. And so as the board is aware, we're the new units that are coming online that are funded and supported by by the Ministry of Children and Families that are being built, as an example, at Forest Park, at Chase River, at Ladysmith, at QQS, at Rock City, etc. One of the concerns that we have is our rental rate structure is very community minded, but our rental rate structure in general does not support the capital and ongoing maintenance costs of facilities that we have. So the board does subsidize essentially every single partner that we rent space to in our facilities. And so as we're getting off the ground with respect to some of these partners for these childcare provision, what we're looking at doing is sitting down with them to talk about making sure that we have a structure that we're going to be able to maintain these facilities. So I don't think there was any expectation that the board would be expanding childcare only to be subsidizing it unless there's ministry support for that. So our AFG, our annual facilities grant, does not go up when we add square footage for childcare, which we're doing. We had no money from that. And so our restriction in the School Act with respect to rental rates for these facilities is that we cannot make any money. So it could be, but it can include our costs. And typically school districts gloss over the capital costs because we've been giving all this money up at the front. But in 30 years, as they start to wear down, or sooner or slightly later, we are going to be stuck potentially looking at our own K-12 dollars to support these. So we want to come up with a structure that's going to be able to maintain these facilities appropriately, set aside reserve dollars with the money that we bring in, because we're not allowed to make anything, to be able to support these over time. But it's very important that we have conversations with our providers, because we don't want to price anyone out of being able to provide a service if indeed that's what's going to occur. We've had some preliminary looks at other school districts as well as local providers. We pay rent in a couple of examples, and we've got some preliminary numbers, which again, after this meeting, we intend to go out and have some conversations with our providers. We've had some feedback already that there are concerns that whatever rate we choose, as these providers get off the ground, there may be circumstances where they're actually well under 100% occupancy of their spaces. One interesting piece of feedback we heard is that COVID has seemingly in some spaces actually dropped the demand for before school care, because parents have a little bit more flexibility about getting their kids to school because of online work, etc. After school care hasn't changed, but when you do the math about how much you can charge for fees, that's a significant difference. And so we're watching that dynamic. So the idea is we also want to be flexible with our partners about how much we would charge. But before we go out to the community, we just wanted to come to the board to say, this is our intent, this is the nature of our conversation, and you can see some rough numbers that we put together based off of doing some of that research.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Greg.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd just like to thank Mark for this report and staff. It's good information. Just a couple of questions. Just looking at the report here, and you mentioned that we don't get any additional funds to do the maintenance of the facilities. Then I understand these are the care units that we're constructing. Couple of questions. The first one is custodial. So is this using our own forces? I noticed it says if applicable, and I just wasn't sure, is this assuming that it's our own QP staff that are going to do the work and we're essentially charging them for that?
Yeah, typically what occurs is where the QP staff are utilized for the provision of childcare, for the cleaning of the childcare units, that they're just charged on a cost basis. There may well be a circumstance, however, where the provider licenses the entire area as if it's like a different plot of land, essentially. And so there may be circumstances where that's not necessarily going to occur, but we don't quite have what that looks like final, but I anticipate the vast majority as it is now will be served by our local and charged back to them.
You have a follow-up question?
I have a few questions, if that's okay, unless there's someone else. We'll do one at a time. How about that?
I don't have anybody else on the list, so go ahead.
Thank you. My next question is where a school site has capacity, which might not exist now because of our enrollment capacity concerns, but where a facility like a before and after school and or daycare is within the building versus in a separate building that we build on site, does that have an effect on the ultimate rental structure, or is it all one and the same?
Yeah, that will be different because it's there's you know, often with before and after school care, it's a kind of a co-located site. So that we need to take care of some, like, we wouldn't expect them to pay the entire custodial freight because we have our custodian going in to clean our room because we're using it in the daytime. So this is really about standalone new facilities as they come online.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Stephanie?
Thank you. To the Secretary Treasurer, you mentioned at this point, because you know it might change in the budget coming up at the end of February, that there is, but we don't have any indication that AFG funding is going to increase, or even that this increase in square footage is going to sort of be accounted for in terms of how the ministry views our square footage and when we're taking on these spaces.
I do not anticipate, I would say with 98% certainty, that we will be credited from the K-12 system. Anything I've heard wouldn't suggest that additional space created by us voluntarily for childcare from another ministry would get included in what the ministry would be maintaining from a square or supporting from a square footage perspective. Because frankly, we, under our contractual obligations, wouldn't be even allowed to use it for K-12 purposes for 15 years.
So I see 2 points of advocacy or perhaps possible actions for us for the board on this. One is to write a letter of advocacy to the ministry pointing this out regarding AFG funding. And the other is that the childcare engagement online engagement process is happening now, and it might be an opportunity for, it closes on February 15th, and the board might want to consider providing this as feedback as part of the engagement process. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back to that in a moment. Greg, you have another question?
Yes, thank you. And I thank Stephanie for bringing that up. It's something that's been on my mind when I read this was, you know, I recognize the need to cover our costs, but at the same time, I recognize the fact that if we pass along too many costs, those are going to funnel down to our parents. So I guess what my question would be is, have we considered as a possibility if it would even make sense from a cost perspective, both construction and ongoing, if instead of building in the future, for example, standalone units, that we were to build small additions that maybe had multi-purpose space as well as daycare space, so that maybe they would just be part of the school maintenance program?
In fact, we have, and we were exploring what that could look like at Pleasant Valley as an example, and the delta between, or the cost difference between the standalone units and the expansion is enormous. And so to the tune of, I think, $2 million or something like that, like a more than 50% more. Now, and again, we didn't have Class A estimates, just to be clear. This was, you know, low-level estimates, but it was so, the delta was so big that we just didn't contemplate it as a reality.
Do you have a follow-up question, Greg?
No, thanks. I just had to ask. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, maybe I could add, though, in the case, though, where we do see expansions, this will be something that we will look at.
Thank you. That was going to be my question, because when we expand the school, we have the potential to add that additional learning space, which could then be turned into the possibility of before and after or daycare space within the school as a component of those construction projects. So thank you for answering my question before I asked it. So I would put a question to the board if they wish for the board to write a letter to the ministry identifying what the Secretary Treasurer said this evening about AFG funds. I would entertain a motion at this time before I move on the agenda. Okay, Stephanie?
Thanks. That the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools, School District 68, write a letter of advocacy to the Ministry of Education to encourage childcare spaces be included as part of AFG calculations and allocations.
And I see that's been seconded by Jessica. Did you want to speak to the motion?
No, I think I just did beforehand, which is backwards, but it was before I moved the motion, so I don't need to repeat myself. Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? With no discussion, I will call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Okay. Regarding the second piece of business that was brought up by Stephanie regarding the childcare survey that's available for feedback, if I were to make a suggestion to the board for consideration, it might be that we direct staff to participate in that childcare consultation process to provide feedback regarding funding. If somebody would like to do so, now would be the time. So I will go to Tanya. Do you have something that you'd like to read, or you can just...
Yes, that we, well, I didn't write it down, but I was listening. That the Board of Education directs staff to participate in the child care survey before the deadline in February 2022.
Okay, and that motion has been seconded by Chantal. Did you want to motivate that, Tanya?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Childcare has repeatedly become an important issue to our parents. It's something that we've heard many comments from people about in terms of wanting on-site childcare, and our staff are the people who see what work goes into providing these childcare sites. So they are certainly the best position to answer the questions in the survey, and I think that it's important that we make sure that our voices are, the educational perspective is brought forward in these discussions, particularly given that it is very likely that the ECE ministry will be joining in with Ministry of Education at some point in the near future, in the next few years. So I think we need to be involved from the get-go.
Thank you. I have Steph. Speakers list.
Thanks. I'm just encouraging staff to take a broad interpretation of the word survey when you engage in that process, because I don't know actually if the survey offers an opportunity for you to put that in there, but there's certainly a way for us to submit our feedback in the engagement process about this. So if the survey doesn't allow this particular piece of information to be part of it, then I would just encourage staff to submit that piece of feedback in the engagement process through the email that's present on the engagement website. I don't think I need to move an amendment for that, but.
Thank you. So I'll speak in favor of the motion and add my thoughts at the same time. I have participated in the childcare survey as an interested party to the process that's being undertaken by multiple ministries. I have taken the time to look at the webinar, one of the webinars that was put on by the Ministry of Child and Families and the Ministry of Education. And I just would encourage our staff to be creative with the possibility of suggesting that the more we can break down silos between ministries, when we identify these moments where we're trying to do something new and innovative to provide services to families and communities, that they are thoughtful in hearing us, and when we identify that the needs are going to be a little bit maybe more than they anticipated, but that breaking down those silos is the key to the success of it as well, because we want to be able to provide these services for families, but we also recognize the need to be fiscally responsible as an entity as well. Are there any other speakers to the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? With no opposition, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for your presentations this evening. That takes us to 14.3, Scott Saywell, vaccine mandate.
Good evening, and through you, Madam Chair. At a special meeting of the board last Thursday, January 20th, the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools Board of Education decided to implement and amend as necessary a vaccine mandate to help protect the health and safety of both students and staff. The board directed staff at that time to create an administrative procedure, which can be found on page 39 of your package this evening. It is still draft and requires a few changes, and with that in mind, I will introduce our new Executive Director of HR, Sean Johnston, to guide you through those changes and then be available to answer questions that trustees may have. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I'll take us through introduction to these draft procedures regarding proof of vaccination regarding COVID-19. And as Scott mentioned, you'll find the procedure starting at page 39. So this procedure is in alignment with the template procedures provided by BCPC, and which has been agreed on by both the BCTF and the QP President's Council. As mentioned, we've made a couple of changes to the draft document that's in the package. Following further discussion and consultation, and I'll point you to those. So there's language on volunteers that we put into the procedures, and again, after discussion and consultation, we feel that these procedures are not the best place to address volunteers, and so we'll be removing the volunteer sections from these procedures. Additionally, this draft includes the requirement of vaccination for new hires, and we're going to be amending that to provide new hires with the option of vaccination or participation in the district's rapid testing program. Under these procedures, employees and individual contractors will have to identify their vaccination status, and those who are vaccinated will be done at that step. Unvaccinated people will have to make the choice of either undergoing rapid testing provided by the district, or to take an unpaid leave of absence for the duration that these procedures are in place. And I'll take you through some of the important dates. So the first date to know is February 18th, 2022. And this is the deadline for employees to let the district know their vaccination status or to select the other options. Then these procedures will come into effect on March 28th, 2022. This date allows ample time between now and that date for anyone who wants to become fully vaccinated to do so. The date lined up with spring break, the return from spring break as well. It gives us a little bit more time than was suggested, but that was the date that made operational sense. And then the procedures are set to expire on June 30th, 2022, unless they were to be extended. I'll note just a few more things. There's a provision in the procedures to work with people seeking accommodations. The procedures cite that employees can take paid leave to attend a vaccination appointment. The procedures provide that false disclosure of vaccination status amounts essentially to misconduct. And the procedures cite the district's commitment to maintaining privacy throughout the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Trustees, are there any questions? So I don't have any questions for you this evening, so I will thank you both for the presentation and the update, and I appreciate that you've gone through a consultation process and made some adjustments based on that feedback, and we will look forward to seeing the implementation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So that takes us to section 15, unfinished business, 15.1 regarding the draft strategic plan policy. So, if you'll excuse me while I bring up the appropriate page in my agenda. So as you will recall, the board passed a motion to send our draft strategic plan policy out to public consultation. We did receive some feedback, and the policy committee met to review the feedback and discuss whether or not there would be any potential changes that we might recommend to the board since the completion of the original draft. Following in-depth conversation on a variety of things raised both by the board as well as comments from the community, the policy committee has asked me on their behalf to present the original draft with no changes brought back to the board. The information sheet does highlight a couple of things which I will touch on just briefly. With regard to some of the feedback that we received, perhaps we needed to be a little more clear when we sent the policy out that this was a policy about how to create a strategic plan for future boards of education, not necessarily that it was the plan itself. And so we did get some good feedback on that. We considered, what we put into our public consultation in the future, and we can make those changes to ensure that we are providing clear information as we consult on these things. Following that, we note that the district review story was a large component of both the feedback from the board and some of the feedback from the community, and we spent a great deal of time discussing those bits and pieces of feedback to sort through what we needed to change, if anything, and it was really around the specificness of the data. The committee discussed each piece of feedback that we received and tried to sort through what, if anything, we would make suggestions on. And so I know that there's been a lot of feedback on it, but what we came back to was the catch-all phrase where other data as necessary. And we really, I think, were encouraged by the idea that once you bring the district review story back, it does include all of the FESL requirements that we're looking for from the ministerial order, which is why that piece was embedded in policy. But what we also acknowledge is that there are many other points in time where we, as a board, get reports back from the superintendent and from various departments of the district that touch on other areas of the strategic plan that might cover things like report cards or different types of data sources. And so we felt that those reports were also a good component of the monitoring and evaluation of that critical analysis that this policy speaks to. But we didn't feel it necessary to put them into a list form in the policy. That being said, we recognize that there's a variety of perspectives, and we're open to hearing the debate and this evening and see if the policy is to move forward as presented or if there are changes based on the feedback and vote by the board this evening. So if there are no changes, there's a recommended motion in the agenda. Alternatively, you could move the recommendation with any amendments that you potentially see as beneficial to the policy as well. So with that, I will turn it over to the board for any questions or comments. So I don't have any questions or comments. So then I would ask potentially for a trustee to move the motion that's in the recommendation. Okay, so Trustee Keller, did you want to read the motion?
Yes, sorry, I lost my place in my agenda. Just give me a quick moment, please.
Of course.
Darn. Sorry, Chair.
That's okay.
Lost my place.
Fine. No problem. Page 45 if it helps you.
Yes, that is actually very helpful. Thank you. 45. There we go. Okay, here we go. So that the Board of Education of School District number 68, Nanaimo Ladysmith, adopt policy 1.2 strategic plan.
Okay, so that's been moved by Greg, and I see it seconded by Jessica. Did you want to speak to the motion, Greg?
I think you did a good job already explaining the motion. I guess I might just add that the committee did spend a fair amount of time considering the comments and the feedback that we received, and I support kind of where we landed. I think it's a good compromise, and I think this is a great policy that'll help move our district forward. So I'll be speaking in support of the motion.
Great, thank you. Are there any other speakers on the motion? Yeah. One moment. Do you want to speak to it?
Hi. I'll get my video on. I just, the one aspect, and I did actually contribute before I was trustee, was on the evaluation, how we would evaluate the strategic plan. And I just had mentioned the one assessment tool that was suggested was using the foundation skills assessment, the FSAs, which I know is a ministry mandated assessment.
So I can, you know what I'll do is I'll speak to this portion on behalf of our new trustee Bailey. So one of the pieces of information that was part of our feedback that we received during the consultation process was regarding the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools District Assessment, and would it be relevant to consider utilizing that data as a data point within the district review story component of the policy. And so what I can share is that we did have this discussion as a policy committee, and it has been a topic that the board has been quite interested in discussing. At this time, we didn't include the district information regarding the Nanaimo Ladysmith Public Schools literacy assessment, simply because we don't collect that level of data across the district. And so what we plan to do is have further discussion on that as a board later, I believe in February at our education committee. So there will be an upcoming conversation on that so that we can understand a little bit more about that data, how we collect it, if we collect it, and then determine the next steps forward. And so if there was a change in district data collection on that point, it would be something that we could revisit at that time with regard to policy. So I'm happy to share that information with everyone this evening, and I can go to our next commenter, Greg.
Thanks, Chair. And I'm just wondering, I'd like to provide the opportunity for our new trustee to have to speak, and I realize she's dealing with some things right now, so I'm wondering if we should entertain a quick recess to give her an opportunity to say what she'd like to say.
Thank you, Greg. That's really kind of you to offer. We're okay to move forward as on this item, and we can revisit the conversation later. Thank you for thinking of that.
Thanks.
So I don't have any other comments on the motion right now, so I will call the question. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? You can do so by raising your hand or commenting in the chat. Okay, so the motion carries. Thank you. And so that moves us forward in our agenda this evening for new business. I don't have any new business this evening. For information, there are board motions report, trustee committee reports. I would like to draw attention to the board annual work plan. There has been a good amount of work done in the last couple of months with the help of various trustees in ensuring that we're hitting all of the different discussion points that the board would like to have in their oversight of the school district. And so we've updated our board annual work plan, and this is attached in the agenda under 17.3 to see what we will be looking at for the remainder of this year. And that takes us into question period. So question period is item 18 on our agenda. It is limited to 15 minutes. And there is a process that is undertaken for questions with regard to how you can participate. It does require names and contact information. And so those that have met the requirements under our policy have been presented to me, and I will begin. So our first First question, so I will actually just add one more thought. I will do my best to pronounce names appropriately, and if I do pronounce your name incorrectly, I apologize. It's very important to me that I'm able to make my best effort and say your names properly, but in the event that I don't, my apologies. So our first question is from Marilyn Wrighthog and Evelyn Barth of Nanaimo. Have trustees researched adverse reactions and deaths of the COVID vaccine? These are tremendous. The results are horrific. The board has heard from our medical health officer that vaccines are safe and effective and are encouraged to be used by the community to prevent the spread and limit the impacts of COVID. Our next question is from Bernice Murchison of Nanaimo. Do the trustees understand that they will be held personally liable for any mandated vaccinations? For this, I will call on our Secretary Treasurer to provide a response.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This statement / question is untrue. The School Act is very clear on this particular issue. And I'll just take a moment with your indulgence to read that act, or in fact, if I'll maybe share my screen so it's up there for when the recording shows up for folks to be able to review. So we can see section 94 sub 1, no action for damages lies or may be instituted against a trustee, an officer, or an employee of a board for anything said or done, omitted to be said or done by him or her in the performance or intended performance of his or her duty, or the exercise of his or her power for alleged neglect or default in the performance of the attended, etc., etc. I note that it does not apply to a trustee, officer, employee who, in the relation of the conduct, has been guilty of dishonesty, gross negligence, or malicious or willful conduct, and that is a circumstance that certainly does not apply in the circumstances. The district has taken time to receive information with respect to the efficacy and safety of vaccination from our medical health officer and guidance from our public health officer, as well as guidance from the Ministry of Education. So on the individual liability, it's just simply not the case. And I would also say that we have had a number of liability letters being delivered in person to principals across the system. And I also want to be very clear that individual principals are not subject to liability with respect to mask requirements in schools, or alternatively a vaccine mandate implemented by the board, or vaccines that are being supported by the MHO and PHO.
Thank you very much. The next question is from Graham Rouse, Ladysmith. Has there been an incentive to the district, board, for instituting COVID policy, vax mandate, or masks? The rationale for the board's determination to implement a vaccine mandate can be found on page 37 of this evening's agenda. With respect to masks, we follow the requirements of the Ministry of Education. Next question is from Amy Collins of Nanaimo. Staff has been given the alternative to do rapid testing as an alternative to disclosing vaccine status. Staff who have had COVID in the past can test positive months after they are in the clear. How is this being addressed? We appreciate the question, and we're going to follow up with our medical health officer regarding your question. Robert Sinclair of Nanaimo, in reference to any COVID-19 testing, have the trustees made themselves familiar with the Genetic Non-Discrimination Act Bill S-201, which states that it is an indictable offense to force anyone to take a DNA/RNA test or deny any service, employment, or education opportunity to anyone who refuses to take such a test? With regard to this question, I will ask our Secretary Treasurer to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we certainly are in possession of advice that the actions of the board with respect to the vaccine mandate in the circumstances are completely in line with legal principles that apply to the board. I would say that particularly with respect to labor relations, you can see the requirements that the board has set out for staff to follow in implementing such a mandate on page 37 of the agenda. And you can see that not only do they take into account any potential human rights principles and accommodations that would be required, it's also allowing individuals that will not be vaccinated an alternative, a reasonable alternative, to get testing instead of the vaccine mandate in the case. I would also say with respect to the actual collection of the information with respect to the vaccination status of our employees, that is well within the bounds of an employer's ability under labor relations law to proceed, as long, and I will be very clear, as long as our commitment to privacy and the manner in which we collect that information is least intrusive, which you are very committed to doing, and ensuring that it's shared with as few people in the organization as is required to actually implement the vaccine mandate. So on all aspects of, of human rights, of privacy, of labor relations law and employment law, we are very satisfied that we are on solid ground with respect to our legal responsibilities. Otherwise, we wouldn't be giving the board we'd be giving the board advice that there was risk, and we see very little risk in the circumstances.
Thank you. The next question this evening is from Justina Bartlett of Nanaimo. Is the loss of staff, community connection, inclusion, and respect worth mandating a vaccine? I do not wish to see staff leave. These are the best hardworking people who've built relationships with the kids, or be discriminated against any more than they already have. I'm going to start by saying that unequivocally, the Board of Education values our employees and the work that they do with our students, including the way they support one another through what has been a very long 2 years of pandemic response. Unequivocally, I believe our board actually thinks that we have the best employees in the province, frankly. So I just think it's important to acknowledge the depth of work that our staff are undertaking. With regards to the rest of the question and comment, I will ask our Secretary Treasurer to provide further response.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, with respect to the mandate, as noted, the board has directed the superintendent to create administrative procedure that allows for accommodations in specific circumstances where there might be supportable under the Human Rights Code, but also the larger accommodation of allowing staff the alternative of a testing regime. And so we can't see the reason that an individual would wish to leave in the circumstances based off of the ability to have an alternative. But the other piece that I think was also important unequivocally to state is that the Board of Education would never knowingly discriminate on a human rights basis against any one of its employees. We understand our obligations under the Human Rights Code, and with respect to the idea of discrimination under the Human Rights Code under Section 13, simply put, the case law doesn't support the concept that the vaccine mandate as it's currently drafted would run afoul of our requirements. And so I certainly understand that our board would never knowingly, and that needs to be clearly stated, never knowingly go afoul of the Human Rights Code. And certainly it's our opinion, both external and internally, that the mandate and the AP that's provided tonight fall well within the bounds of the Human Rights Code requirements.
Thank you for that response. The last question I have this evening is from Megan Northfolk of Ladysmith. With regard to the vaccine mandate, Chair McKay, you are quoted as saying, "We did not take this decision lightly and it follows a careful review of considerations." Could you please provide details of those considerations? Do you acknowledge that the COVID-19 vaccines do not prevent transmission of the SARS-CoV-2 virus as stated by the CDC? So in answer to this question, I would refer this this question back to page 37 this evening of the agenda that outlines the rationale that's been provided by the board. And I'd also like to note that we've heard from our local MHO regarding the impact of vaccination on COVID-19. And furthermore, I would outline that discussions such as this take place in-camera meetings as they relate to our labor force. And the only thing that I can share publicly is that each member of the board who participated in this decision was thoughtful. They asked good questions. It was solid discussion. And we considered as many aspects as we could as individuals to make a decision as a board. And the decision has led to the procedure that was presented this evening. And we will be moving forward from there. That concludes our question period this evening, and so I will ask trustees for a motion to adjourn. I have a motion from Jessica and a second from Greg. Is there anyone opposed to an adjournment? With no one opposed, the meeting is adjourned at 7:22.